Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gunshine State, brought to you by Florida Carry. I'm your host, Craig DeLuz, and we're going to be talking about firearms policy, Second Amendment, civil rights advocacy, you name it, all based right here in the great state of Florida. So please take a moment, like and share the program so that your friends can know where the conversation is taking place. Also, if you haven't already done so, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook. And in both cases, make sure you hit the notification button. That way you can participate in the live chat as soon as the program goes live. So you guys want to make sure that you do that. Also, want to encourage you, Florida Carry is the state of Florida's premier Second Amendment civil rights advocacy group. We're a membership organization, and we need your help and your support. If you're not a member, please become a member. All you got to do is follow the join link in the description of this video, and you'll take care of it from there. There's numerous membership levels depending on where you'd like to be. Also, if you are a member, please take a moment and donate. Always want to encourage you. We need your support for the work that we're doing, fighting for your right to keep and bear arms here in the state of Florida. All right. Speaking of that, and we'll get into this topic now. So in the state of Florida recently, or not even so much recently, but there's been this issue that has been taking place where individuals who are following the law, exercising their fundamental right to bear arms, through open carry here in the state of Florida. Now, many of you may not know that it actually is legal to open carry in certain instances. In particular, if you are hunting, camping, fishing, or on your way to or from, then you are legally allowed to open carry in the state of Florida. Now, the problem is that unfortunately there are some folks who are in local law enforcement who don't really know the law and don't really know and understand that this is in fact something that you can do, and have in numerous cases held individuals who are doing nothing more once again than exercising their rights under the law, have actually held them at gunpoint, detained them, taken their firearms, whatever. But they've done a number of different things that are clear and obvious violations of not just their constitutional right to bear arms, to keep and bear arms, but also they're also Florida law. And, you have some folks who think this is kind of innocuous, but if you think it's kind of innocuous, check out this video.
We're all fishing. We're all open carrying and completely legal. And we're about to find out what's going to go down. This should be a good interaction. They should be like, hey, just respecting the law. And that's what we're doing. Even though the park ranger did say something about me having an afro and being we won't say an African American male, but just saying something about my afro. But we'll see what happens.
Put your hands on your head. Put them on your head. Hands down. Okay? Hands down. Don't move for the gun. Don't move for the gun. Put
I ain't touching my gun, man.
Put it on your head. Put it on your head. Put it on your head.
Why, what's going on, man? What's going on?
Put your hand behind your back.
Not resisting. Not resisting. I don't know what's going on.
We'll explain to you now, man.
Hey, I'm letting you know within the Florida statute. Hey, please, it's locked and loaded, buddy. It's a server holster. Please.
So as you can see, these folks are not playing around. And the worst part is that once again, they don't know the law. They don't understand the law. So, Florida Carry actually had sent a letter to all local law enforcement throughout the state of Florida advising them that you are now on notice that numerous officers at the local level have been violating the law, and they don't understand the law. And clearly the issue is not them. The issue is the training that they are being provided. And we wanted to let them know that, you folks are now on notice that you will train your officers correctly, or you will or there will be consequences. And to talk a little bit about both the letter and about this issue in general, we have a fantastic attorney and a board member with Florida Carry, Mr. Eric Friday. Eric, welcome to the program.
Hey, Craig. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So, sir, all right. So do me a favor and let our viewers know, what exactly is the situation? What's going on with these cases?
Well, the problem we have in Florida is that at least historically in Florida, police officers get absolutely zero training in the police academy regarding lawful carry by citizens of firearms. So they are getting sent out of the academy completely untrained. Now, in the past year or so, they've started rolling out training for the officers, but that's a small minority of the total number of officers actually on the streets in Florida, and they have no knowledge of Florida firearms laws as it relates to citizen carry.
Well, it's funny you say that because I think people think that that cops know the law. And first of all, as a lawyer, and I won't hold that against you, but as a lawyer, you know how complicated all of the law is. That's why you have people who specialize in certain areas. But law enforcement is expected, or people think they know everything, or the worst part is when they think they know everything relating to the law. And then they go out and they violate the rights of citizens, as we clearly saw in the video.
Absolutely. And listen, I don't expect an officer to know even all of the criminal laws in Florida, but I do expect officers to know certain things. For example, officers really should have knowledge. There is no excuse for an officer not knowing the laws of Florida regarding citizen carry of firearms. Just this week, we had an officer tried to go after a person because he thought they weren't allowed to carry during a declared emergency. That's just not the law. And, when we're going to be declaring states of emergency, it might be time to send out a little notice to the officers that, hey, here's a reminder. And the fact is, almost every department in Florida has a legal advisor, a lawyer who sits in that position, and that's their job to make sure the officers are updated on the law as it changes, because it changes every time a new court decision comes out.
Right. And I think that, and this is, I think we're as civil rights advocates, and I don't just talk about it as, we're Second Amendment advocates. We're civil rights activists, because the Second Amendment is a civil right. But I think that oftentimes law enforcement, they're balancing like security versus liberty, and oftentimes they fall on the side of perceived, and I say perceived security over liberty, in terms of the policies that they tend to want to implement. Some of these departments and some of these the higher ups, and the challenge I think that creates though for us is whenever there's a state of emergency like there is now, they think that by taking away our liberty, they're making us safer.
Well, and the problem is, as the court said in the Heller decision, the enumeration of certain rights in the Constitution takes the right or the ability of the government to balance those interests out of the equation and out of government's hands. So once that right's there, it's a right. And yeah, there's the whole language everybody likes to quote about, reasonable restrictions. Well, those restrictions have to be delineated in the law. It's a very fundamental tenet of criminal law in most states, and especially in Florida, that if you're going to bring criminal charges, or if it's going to be a criminal law, it has to be clearly delineated ahead of time by statute, not by some officer's policy or some officer's interpretation of that balancing interest.
Well, and the worst part about it is that in many cases they see even the temporary. They see, well, we're going to temporarily, hold you at gunpoint, or temporarily take your firearm away from you, or temporarily put you in handcuffs while we figure it out. And during this entire time, your rights as a citizen are being violated based solely on the ignorance of the officer's ignorance of firearms law, and in this particular case, open carry.
Absolutely. And so the law for police officers in Florida is the same as for everybody. They don't have special rights in this state. Now, I'm not going to speak to other states' laws, but for example, the statute that allows us to open carry while hunting, fishing, and camping is 790.25 Florida statute. And a lot of times I'll ask an officer, I'll say, well, what allows you to open carry? Well, I have a badge. I'm a law enforcement officer. Yes, but Florida law is there is no open carry. So is there an exception that allows you as a police officer to open carry? Well, no, I'm just a police officer. And I say, no, actually the same statute that gives us the right to open carry while fishing is the same statute that says law enforcement officers are allowed to open carry. So it's the same law. It's not some weird, as they like to say, loophole in the law. It's the same law that they open carry under every day because they don't have any special rights.
Right. Well, don't you love how they take the idea of complying with the law, they want to call it a loophole. And that's what it is. Whenever you comply with the law in a way in which they don't like, they call it a loophole, and they want to close that loophole because really what they want to do is they want to change the law and take away your fundamental rights.
Well, I always define a legal loophole as a law you don't like.
Hey, now do me a favor. Tell the audience a little bit about the letter that Florida Carry sent out to local law enforcement throughout the state of Florida, and what was kind of the impetus behind it.
So we had a series of events beginning back in June of 2018, and there had been a couple before, but in June of 2018, six individuals were stopped at gunpoint on the Miami Beach Pier. They were then handcuffed and held for over an hour in handcuffs, and then were detained even after the handcuffs were taken off. After the officers knew no crime had been committed, they continued to hold these people against their will and then closed down a public pier just because they wanted to make sure these people went away. And following that incident, we had several others, including where one of our board of directors was held at gunpoint and proned out by some officers in another county. And then a third person, he kept getting guns pointed at him by law enforcement. So we sent out a letter to all law enforcement in the state that said, essentially, this is the law in Florida. You know it. You have a duty to train. These incidents have happened. We're putting you on notice that you have a training problem statewide in the state of Florida, and you need to fix it. And part of the reason is we have this absurd judge-created doctrine called qualified immunity that says if the department doesn't have a reason to believe or a reason to know of a lack of training, then the department has no duty to train the officers regarding that law. And so we're putting the departments and the sheriffs and police departments on notice that they have a duty to train, that this is something their officers don't seem to know about, and they need to fix it because this letter is going to be exhibit 1 when they try to raise that they have a qualified immunity because it wasn't reasonable to expect them to know this law.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the thing. And it's, as I've pointed out, I don't know how many different times, it's sad that we have to spend money because we all know court cases cost money, but that we have to spend money in order against our own money, which is tax dollars, in order to be able to fight for something that always should be ours, our right, our fundamental rights.
And that frustrates me when I'm in Tallahassee lobbying that we see police chiefs, we see sheriffs coming to the Capitol and speaking to the legislators on taxpayer time to fight against our civil rights. And that should, it's proper for law enforcement to let legislators know this is an issue that needs to be addressed by law. This is an issue that needs to be addressed by law. But when they go to Tallahassee and argue to the legislators that our constitutional rights, that our liberty should be infringed to make their job easier, I have a problem with that. Our tax dollars should not be going to make their job easier over our liberty.
Well, and that's what totalitarian governments do. And they always say, they always say, look, we're taking away your liberties or restricting or infringing upon your liberties in order to keep you safe. And in the end, what they mean is in order to control you. Now, they believe that they're controlling you is in your best interest because, quite frankly, they know they know better than you what is good for you.
Well, and that's, kind of the antithesis of liberty. Liberty's messy. Freedom is messy. Yeah, I'm a big believer in Ben Franklin's statement that those who would sacrifice liberty for safety deserve neither. Look, we're seeing that right now with this whole quarantine, these stay-at-home orders. While I recognize the general police powers of local government that the courts have long recognized, we're also seeing that the government that is powerful enough to so-called keep you safe is also a government that might decide they want to use those powers even further later and for less of an emergency. And it is concerning to me.
Oh, and it as well it should be. I think that we as citizens, I think the founding fathers had a healthy distrust of government, which is why they created the system that they did with checks and balances. It's clear that they reckoned that for them the important thing was the individual needed that rights existed with the individual, not the government. You look at the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is basically a collection of things that are telling the government, the federal government, you can't do this. These rights belong to the people. And I think sometimes government forgets that.
I would say government forgets that on a regular basis. And unfortunately, we're seeing, and it's not unique to one party. It's not it's not a situation where only one political philosophy feels that way. It seems to be just the nature of government that they're going to take power wherever they can. And that's ultimately the fundamental reason behind the Second Amendment and why we have a Second Amendment is to enable us, should it ever become necessary, to say, no, this is our line, this is where it stops, and we're not going to allow you to take any more power than what you have.
Exactamundo. And by the way, folks, just so you know, before we close this out, you guys know that this action, this work, is in the event that Florida Carry should need to address some of these issues legally, that it takes resources in order to go to Tallahassee and influence and work with legislators. It takes resources. So I just think it's vitally important that you guys know and understand. Look, Florida Carry is a membership organization. If you're not a member, you need to become a member. Follow the link in the description of this video. And if you are a member, you should consider making an additional donation or a contribution to the work that Florida Carry does. Am I right?
Absolutely. Look, we have one of the most shoestring operations I've ever seen. Our entire board of directors is volunteer. With a limited exception, I take every case for Florida Carry on a contingency basis. So Florida Carry is not paying legal fees on a daily basis, but we do have to pay for things like the filing fee for the court, the transcripts, the court reporters' fees. Those things have to be paid for. But know that we operate this organization on a very tight budget, and we are very careful with how we spend the money that our members entrust us with to fight for their rights. And I do have to give a shout out to a lot of our local governments when I have pointed out to them over the past week the necessity for guns and why firearms businesses and retailers are essential businesses. Every department that I've had contact with has responded positively over the course of the last week. I'm still waiting on comments or responses back from a few departments, few cities and counties, but for the most part, the cities and counties have been very responsive and said, no, we're not going to try and shut down gun ranges. But understand, we've been on the lookout for that daily since this started, since we started getting these state of emergencies. We have on a daily basis responded to member concerns, member questions to make sure that their local governments knew where the limits were and where we were drawing the lines. And so far, so good.
Excellent, sir. Once again, Eric, thank you so much for coming on the program. Very much appreciate you. Look forward to having you on again soon.
Thanks, Craig.
All right, everybody. Mr. Eric Friday. All right, folks. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the Gunshine State. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing this program and telling your friends about Florida Carry, Florida's premier Second Amendment civil rights advocacy group. Talk to you guys again real soon.